So that was leading me down this path of kind of making ever more money in jobs that were less and less satisfying, with some good parts along the way. And I take, I've learned that even the most challenging moments of a career or a life experience can be our greatest teacher, right? So if something's really hard in the moment, it's easy to feel like, oh, why is this happening to me? Or as opposed to, how can I take this lesson and use it? Or how is this happening for me? Right? What am I learning? What am I being taught right here and right now? So I recognize that even those challenges, they're all part of shaping us into who we are. And so all lessons are good lessons, even the really hard ones, right?
Welcome back to the show, Disruptors. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. This is the show where we help you be your best so you can give your best. And today we're talking with Eric Sardina. He left a long and successful career in the corporate world to become a coach, a consultant, speaker, and host of the Point of Impact. No, host of the Return to Authenticity podcast. And today we're talking about running, stretching, and failure. Of course, running, because we're both runners, and it becomes a great metaphor for a few universal truths that can be applied all across our lives. Personal wellness, well-being, relationships, our family, and of course, work. And literally, success in running, but the stretching part, though it's also important when you're a runner, but today we're using it more as a figurative rather than a literal stretching. Why, and of course failure, why we're afraid of failure, stretching beyond our comfort zone, stretching beyond what we know we've already been able to accomplish. Why are we afraid to reach beyond our current capabilities? Why are we afraid of failure? But the truth is, if we're not failing, we're probably not learning. We're not growing. We're not getting stronger. We're better. So if we're not failing, we're probably not trying hard enough. And that's what we're discussing today. So without further ado, a conversation with Eric Sardina right now. Eric, welcome to the Point of Impact. I'm so glad to have you.
Aaron, it's a pleasure to be here, my man. I so appreciate having you. It was great having you on my show, one of my more recent episodes. And man, what a fun talk we had. We could have gone, I think, for another couple of hours. There were so many areas of your background, dude, your time in Italy. We could talk about food, cooking, all of it, man. So many areas. So I'm so honored to be on your show. I appreciate you having me.
What's this about Italy?
When you did your time on the fantail of those boats, man, cruising up and down Italy.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And my wife and I did a 2-week trip to Italy, and we're ready to just move there. I'm thinking there's got to be a place there for someone that speaks basically no Italian, but English very well, to take care of the English speaking tourists. I don't know. There's got to be something for me to do over there and make a few bucks and just hang out, drink a lot of coffee.
There's a guy, Justin Moore. He's big on, I think it's branding, marketing, social media. He up and moved to Italy because he's like one of those, the tech nomad guys, and just moved out there. And then he loves it. I lived in Italy for 4 years. I can't wait. I couldn't wait to get back. It took my wife to Florence for our honeymoon. That was hilarious because I'd just gone deaf too. But anyways,
Florence is one of my favorite. I mean, I don't have a non-favorite. I don't have I didn't find a town that I didn't like in Italy. I went there with this expectation that Rome was going to be a check the box. We got to see it, but I've heard it's so busy and crowded and dirty. And so we're going to go see the Vatican and then see a few relics and move on. And I loved Rome. I fell in love with Rome. And then that was our first stop. And every city from there was just better. It was incredible. Florence probably became my favorite big city, but the Tuscany area, that region was fabulous. Just, I could have, we stayed in one of these agritourism places. So it was a functioning wheat farm that had taken these 1,000-year-old stone buildings and turned them into little cottages. And we stayed in one, and it was like $70 a night or something ridiculously cheap. And we would walk out onto our patio, and you would see just layer after layer of what looked like postcard photographs every direction you looked, of like dark green, medium green, light green, rolling hills, trees. I'm like, we're in heaven. This is incredible. And the innkeeper, I was ready to just find a way to hit him in the head with a rock so that I could take over his job. It was, I'm like, this guy's got the greatest. He's super chill. I'm like, why wouldn't you be? He's just kind of hanging out in this gorgeous area, eating great food, drinking wine, surrounded by just unbelievable beauty. And he told some great stories of how his family came to own this property during the war, during World War II, when the cities were having all this fighting, and they kind of moved away from the city to get safe and settled into this rural country area and started farming and spending their family ever since,
Yeah, it's like that parable about the Mexican fisherman and the corporate guy that comes down for the
Yes.
like fishing trip. That kind of reminds me of that, where it's like, why would I want to do all that stuff
Right.
so I could like play my guitar,
Come
smoke a
back here.
cigar, drink some wine. I'm living the life now. Why do I need all that money and stuff?
That is the greatest parable, man. Yeah, it's like, why do you want to do all this crazy stuff? Well, so you can build it all up, sell your business, and then retire on the beach and fish. He's like, I'm doing that right now. Why would I go to all that trouble? Just
To
keep
do
fishing.
what I'm doing now. But that I think that's one of those things, like the built into the American grind set. You need to work really hard so you can earn relaxation when you're really old.
Right. And can't enjoy it. Right.
I mean, you need to be as miserable as you possibly can, or at least just suck it up for 40, 50 years. And here's a gray cubicle for you to do it. Or and and people, I've talked to a few people on the show that do the expat thing or the part-time, the 4-hour work week, like part-time retirement type things, where they're making plenty of money, at least enough that they can or design a life where they can take vacations, and it doesn't take all that much to reach a level where you have an income that supports exactly what you need and not all the crap, you know?
I'm telling you, I'm right there with you, man. It's so funny you say that, because my wife and I were talking about that very thing, earlier today. People, when I left my corporate life, I get the question now, like, you're retired, right? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not retired. I'm working pretty doggone hard, but we're able to design the life that we want to live, right? So we've also, while I work pretty hard building the business I'm building, it's on my terms. I work kind of when and where, and we've traveled more in the last 4 years than I think the prior 20 years combined, and so it's different, right? It's just a different mentality. But you're right. I can remember my first job out of college was at a massive defense contractor, right? General Dynamics at the time, which is now owned by that particular area or that particular plant is now owned by Lockheed Martin. And it was a cube city. I walked into that first day of work, and it was just like gray cubicles as far as the eye could see. And I was like, woo, wow, this is what I went through 4 years, working my tail off in college. I got this job. Now, I was excited for it because I was an aerospace guy anyway. I loved fighter jets and stuff as a kid. And they were making, and I guess still do, make parts of the F-16 fighter plane, and so it was right there. I could go look at a F-16 being built or a whole bunch of them being built anytime I wanted to walk into the plant. And so I was excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, but man, that cubicle environment was a little heavy. And they're also, as a defense contractor, for safety and for, I should say, security, they have no windows because they don't want anybody peeping in the windows to see what's going on. So there's no daylight. There's no sunshine happening inside. Once you walk in that plant and even into the office side, either way, it's all fluorescent tubes, you know?
You ever see that? Did you ever see the movie, the Tom Hanks movie, Joe versus Volcano?
Yes. A long time ago.
Maybe his worst movie ever. But the beginning, it is so gray and fluorescent, and it looks like it's sucking the life out of him as you're watching the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
I could just picture. You remember I'm sure, like the cubicles, and you got the phone with that like just like the pink beige handset, the curly thing, and it's got that
Yeah.
shoulder rest the
Oh,
thing on
I
it.
had one of those. Yeah, man.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, what did you study in college? And weren't you originally in sales?
So I studied finance. My dream was to be a Wall Street guy. So I studied finance. I graduated high school in 1986, and then I think in 1987, the movie Wall Street came out, and so Gordon Gekko and just all that, Bud Fox, and man, I watched that movie probably 100 times. Greed is good, and all the cool guy stuff that he had, the cars and the boats and all the stuff. And I'm like, man, that just seems great. And I did have a real interest in the stock market and analyzing companies and understanding financial statements and all that stuff. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my degree in finance, and I'm going to go off into the world of high finance and banking, not so much banking, more like Wall Street investment, stuff like that. And when I graduated, I I realized that life wasn't really about managing and understanding companies. It was about sales. You know, if you want to go be a stockbroker for an investment house like a Merrill Lynch or something, it's a big time sales job. And I was like, well, that's not really what I want to do. And so I took the other road, which is I went into banking. And I was in a training program to be a commercial lending officer. And I love that. It was really cool. I did get to understand and analyze companies then because I was analyzing financial statements to determine credit worthiness of companies that wanted to borrow money to grow their business or buy a building or invest somehow. So it was a lot of fun. So I did that early in my career. And went into commercial lending then. So I was a lender, and after doing that for about 7 years, I had an opportunity to join one of the large consulting organizations at the time called Ernst and Young. Now I think they just call themselves EY. I think they took the words out. Too hard to remember, I guess. And they were building a team of business developers that could speak to the financial people like CFOs that accountants have to speak to. And so understood enough about finance and business, but that also had a relationship management / business development background and desire. And so I joined them, and that was fantastic as well. So I loved EY and had a nice run there into the .com era. So the year 2000 came about, and everybody was making millions in the joining these .coms. And I'm a more conservative guy, right? So I waited and watched my friends leave and go make their fortunes. And then I finally left EY in the spring of 2000, post Y2K. Everybody went, oh, Y2K. That wasn't the disaster everybody thought it was going to be. And all these companies had spent like mega money to get ready for Y2K. And then nothing really happened, or they were, had done a good job of preparing for it. And that party ended, and all these budgets had been spent. And I left EY to go into a .com in March of 2000. And it was a wild and wacky ride, man. These .coms were all folding up shop and closing. And so all of a sudden I went from being like this on a pretty good upward trajectory. Every time I made a move, I was getting a good hit, to, oh my gosh, the earth has fallen out from beneath me. And every time I joined a .com, like a month later, they closed the doors. So I did like 4 of them in about a 12 or 14 month period. And I was like, this is crazy. I gotta get some stability back underneath me here. My wife was at the time, had just had our second child. Our son James was born in 2000. And I'm like, I'm the breadwinner, right? So I'm the guy my wife was a stay-at-home mom, as we designed and desired. And so I was like, I got to get some stability. Otherwise, I've got responsibilities here to my family. So I went back to the consulting world, and I joined Deloitte. And so I worked at Deloitte doing business development there, and loved that. I had a great run through Deloitte, and then ultimately left Deloitte to do another corporate gig with a healthcare company, right? So I went into the healthcare space, had a little taste of healthcare while at Deloitte, and then went into the healthcare world. So I was serving some healthcare clients while at Deloitte's, and serving and really calling into those sectors. And so I left and joined a startup healthcare company, and had a nice run with that, and then joined another one. And that was kind of the end of my corporate career. That last healthcare stop was kind of a wild and wacky ride, and led me to really kind of, for the first time, take a pause and say, what the heck's going on here with my work life, my career, my purpose on the earth? Like, am I doing the things I need to be doing, or what's happening? And so that's when I started doing my own thing. But that's a whole story.
Well, it's an interesting transition. I like that you mentioned recognizing that even in finance, that it's sales. And that was one of those things, even when I was starting a fudge company, that I didn't realize that every business is sales. And it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what you're making. There's sales, marketing, production, operations, and finance. But everything else is kind of operational, but if you can't sell it, I mean, everything is sales. So when we got our product and we got the operations going, and then it was like, okay, I guess we're marketers now. So that makes a lot of sense.
To your point, everything starts and stops with sales. Like, you can have the greatest operation, all, Six Sigma and just dialed in tight, and greatest product, the most delicious fudge or the best whatever widget. But if you can't sell it, if you can't figure out a way to sell it and sell a lot of it, then it's all going away, right? You've got to sell. And then the other thing, you can be a pretty bad operator and sell your way through that, right? Now it's going to scorch some earth, but sales makes up for a lot of sins. Whereas without sales, it doesn't matter how great everything else is, it's not going to last. You've got to be able to sell.
Yeah, everything else is kind of quality and efficiency, but if it's not selling, it's not moving.
That's right.
So through this career trajectory, uh, did you start to learn a few things about, like, when did the transition come, when you realized, leave the stressful corporate world and go into the coaching and mentoring?
Yeah. Great question. I appreciate the question. They're all good questions, but I so appreciate that question. For me, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and looking into this. So, like, my first job out of school, I had a plan. Like, finance was a thing. I wanted to do the Wall Street thing. I love studying companies. And so when I went to go do that, it was like a dream. It was like a dream had come true. It was so fun, and I just loved it. And then as I started to progress in my career, a few things outside of my control happened. So the bank that I had gone to work with that I loved and loved the people and loved the culture and just, man, I was like, man, I'll work here forever. I'll just keep moving up. And I just loved it. Well, the bank, which was privately held by a family, it was $1 billion bank and privately held. So a very large privately owned bank sold to a large national bank. And when that happened, many of the people left, the people that I really cared about. And this was like the first, like, oh, wow, something happened like way outside my control and I didn't see it coming. And it just changed everything about that bank. And so I was all of a sudden feeling on the outside and I started to look around, like, what else could I go do? And made a change right there. And for me, as a pretty conservative guy, I would have said early in my career, like, I'm going to be the guy that works for one place for 30 years and then retires with the gold watch and all that. And when life threw that curveball, I was like, huh. And so I left that bank, went to a different bank, and then that was good, but it wasn't as good. It was a national bank, a different national bank, big one. And it didn't have the same feel to it, right? So it was, I just was feeling a bit like, I'm here to make money. I'm here to, do some things, but it didn't have that family feel to me. And then I made what I would say was a good decision on the surface and served a purpose, but it also set me on a bad track, which was I left that bank to join another finance organization 100% for the money. And I did it for my family because at the time, as I mentioned, my wife had just had our second kiddo, and all of a sudden I was feeling this pressure. Let me back up. So my wife had our first child and immediately said, we both decided she's not going to go back to work. We didn't really know until our daughter was born that what we were going to do there. So we thought, well, maybe she'll go back to work, maybe she won't. And as soon as Madeline was born, we're like, no, there's nobody that's going to raise our daughter other than us. And I understand people that choose to have both spouses working. That's cool. It works for some, and it's everybody's choice there. And but for us, it was like, no, we're going to figure out a way. Well, when my wife stopped working, it cut our pay in half, and immediately I was like, oh man, I got to step up the game here. And so when I had that opportunity to go to that finance organization, it was like, I didn't really take a lot of time to understand, is this a good fit? Is it the right thing for me? Why do I want to go? It was like, it's an opportunity. I had an inside track because I knew some people at the organization. It was going to be significantly more money, and I'm just going to take it because I needed the money so that my wife could stay at home. And it was not a fun place. It was not a good fit, but I was just like, I'm just going to grind it out. I have the ability to do hard things. I can put my shoulder into this. It's my job as the provider, as the breadwinner. This is what I need to just do. And I did that. And it didn't last long because after about 18 months of that, I was like, this is not good. And so I need to find something else. And I had another opportunity come from that took me into the consulting world where I joined EY. Now, that move to EY was another significant pay bump, and it worked out in terms of like, I really enjoyed my time at EY. It was a good culture. It was a good team I was on, and I enjoyed it. But it's really started me down this path of when I looked at then when I went into the .com world, I did that again. It was pretty much a money call. Like I wanted to go make a bunch of money in the stock, in the options and the things that you would get from a .com. Even though the first .com that I went to, it was a middleware company. I didn't know what middleware was, but I knew somebody that had gone there, and they were like, yeah, we're going to be selling middleware. And I'm like, okay, cool. I probably can figure that out. What's middleware? And it, turns out it's software that talks to software. It sits in the middle, and it helps software to communicate. Well, that's super sexy, right? I'm like, I don't even understand what this is, and yet I'm going to try to figure out a way to sell it to technology people. And so it was challenging, but I was just convinced, well, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. And and it was rough. And of course, the dot-com world was then turned over. Even some of the really people that were very good at it were struggling and getting spit out. And I was new at it and immediately got spit out. And so but it started me down this path of making decisions that were very heavily money based and not so much based on, is this the right fit for me? Should I be doing this? Is this align with my values? Does it align with the things that light me up? Is it something I'm excited about, interested in? And I was just doing it because, like, well, it pays a lot, and I'll figure it out, right? I'll make it work. I'll work hard. I'm bright enough, hardworking enough, and I'll beat the rest of them, right? And I had sort of an arrogance to me about that, and that really came around to bite me many times then as my career progressed, because I was making that similar decision over and over again. And I had a coach that told me at one point that life continues to teach us the lessons we refuse to learn, right? And so it's like I just wasn't learning this lesson that when you make a decision strictly based on something like money, that it's likely not going to go well. And in fact, you're also likely not going to get the money that you think you're going to get, right?
History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Right. Exactly right. 100%. So, so that was leading me down this path of kind of making ever more money in jobs that were less and less satisfying, with some good parts along the way. And I take, I've learned that even the most challenging moments of a career or a life experience can be our greatest teacher, right? So if something's really hard in the moment, it's easy to feel like, oh, why is this happening to me? Or as opposed to, how can I take this lesson and use it? Or how is this happening for me? Right? What am I learning? What am I being taught right here and right now? So I recognize that even those challenges, they're all part of shaping us into who we are. And so all lessons are good lessons, even the really hard ones, right? At the same time, when I look at this kind of my work, it was like success that would typically end up going sideways in some way, right? And it was often because there was this misalignment for me with, again, what I was interested in, what I believe my mission is here on the earth, my purpose, my core values. I just had discarded all that and said, well, but the money's really good, so I'll make all that other stuff I'll figure out a way to make that other stuff okay, just so that I can go make this money. And once I have enough money, well, then I can settle back into me and my purpose, my values and things like that. But I don't have the luxury of that now. I just have to make money to take care of my family. And it led to, I think, a lot of the sideways exits to things, or the dissatisfied departures and things like that as I went through my corporate career.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too that whole job loyalty, I think, was abandoned back. That's like a Generation X and earlier thing. Yeah, I don't know where it changed. Maybe it was doing away with pensions to our 401ks, where there's no more job loyalty. But then, is there really any more employee loyalty? All it takes is one good bubble, or a recession to uh, resize the company. And job security really is kind of a myth, uh, or at least a kind of a false crutch for a lot of people. And you know, you never know. You never know. So you got to be prepared. You got to be agile, and you definitely have to build up uh, that tolerance for the unknown, for the possible chaos. Right?
Agreed. Yeah, I think if you look a generation before me, you're absolutely right that there was this sense, like if you joined a company, say like an IBM, that you were almost like you bled blue, right? And you were like an IBMer, and it was almost like being to make a football analogy, if you're a Buffalo Bill, like I'm a big time Buffalo Bill fan, you would never, like as a fan, I don't think it's true for the players, but you would never go and all of a sudden start rooting for the Miami Dolphins, right? Because they're the big rival. And so as an IBMer, you'd never go to like Digital Equipment or something, DEC, who I don't think even exists anymore, or Compaq or HP. You're just never going to do it because it's just like, no, I'm an IBMer. But that notion is now gone, right? That doesn't hold true anymore. There's not the contract from the employer to the employee, and then the equal contract from the employee back to the employer that says, I'm not going to leave you for a few dollars to go across the street to our rival. And the employer says, yeah, even when we're having a tough quarter, I'm not going to lay off a worker that's been here for 15 or 20 years, who's been a good, solid citizen, because we're having a tough quarter, and I'm sorry. And so both sides, that contract is now gone to where, yeah, if it's a tough quarter, sorry, we're having layoffs. I was talking with a buddy who worked for Cisco, big technology Cisco, not the food Cisco. And he'd been there like 20 years and a high performer. And he's like, yeah, I got laid off once after winning like an employee of the year award, manager of the year award type award, had gotten a 5-star review, and got maxed out my bonuses. But then the company was having typical tech kind of, ebbs and flows. It was having an ebb, and the group he was in was getting a massive cut. And he's like, I got notified that I was getting let go, that I was going to be laid off. And he's like, right after I had received all these awards. And then before the layoff actually took place, they found another home for me within the company, and I stayed. But many of my peers that were in a similar boat, they didn't have that opportunity, so they were gone. And he said, I always know I'm kind of one quarter away from getting shown the door here, even though I've been a top performer for 15 or 20 years. And you think, man, that is true. And that is the way it is with American corporate life. But it's rough, it's a rough, because what happens is there's just no grace given on either side. And you create these environments where people are just clawing to and fighting, and almost like the analogy of crabs in a bucket, right? So if you've heard of this, right? So if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, you don't even need to put a lid on the bucket, because the crabs won't let the other crabs crawl out, right? So crabs will crawl on top of each other and start digging and clawing their way to the top. And as soon as they get near the top, another crab will pull them back in. And so that's sort of this, this eat or be eaten mentality that gets created in many, not all, many corporate places, because there's just no loyalty on any side. And it's tough, man. It's tough to do that, right? It's tough to live through that for a long period. And again, it's a broad brush statement. I have many friends still in the corporate world that seem to love what they're doing and feel great about the company. But that overarching contract and the idea of I'm going to work somewhere from start to finish of my career is long gone, unfortunately, I think, in our American corporate society.
I think, I forget who said it. There was a statistic out there. The average career tenure now at a job is something like 3 years for a professional job. One of the number one way to get a promotion or get a raise is to move next door.
Mm.
You dust off that resume, or just keep it fresh, and move to the next place. But you talk quite a bit about uh, purpose, and do you think that lack? Because I know job devotion to your occupation, and sometimes devotion to that company, if some that's the military, that is part of their purpose. That is their purpose. So when you've got this uncertainty, this loose footing, or maybe just a view of a perception of a loose footing, does that aid in this lack of purpose and maybe anxiety, depression that I think would, the more recent generations are feeling?
Yeah, I could speak for myself, so the last corporate role that I had, I was in a C-suite executive, right? So I was helping to run all of the promotion, advertising, marketing, sales, kind of new customer acquisition for a pretty significant men's health company, men's health facility or clinic nationally. And it was that role, that job became all about the money, right? So it was like the only reason, the only joy I'm really extracting from this is this idea that we're going to sell and I'm going to make a whole bunch of money at the end. And it became more and more and more tenuous there. Leadership team, everything was very, very challenging. And I started to, for the first time, ask myself, like, what am I doing here? Like, what is the point of this? Um, and so this would have been back in around 2018, 19, right before COVID. Um, I've run a lot and I um, run marathons and do things like this, right? But I had this mode of what I would call stealth training, right? So I would train, but I wouldn't tell people what I was training for or that what time that I was going to try to qualify or do, how fast I was attempting to run a marathon. Cause I just didn't want to, if I missed that goal, I would feel disappointed if someone's like, oh, did you hit your time goal? And I'd tell them, oh, I missed it by a minute or two or whatever. So I just kept it all under wraps, right? It was kind of what I would say playing very safe and just, I don't want to quote unquote lose or be disappointed. So I just sort of stealth train. And then I had a friend ask if I would train her to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I said, based on the time she needed to run, I was really confident that I could run that time and train her to run that time. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And she started to be very like outward to her friends. Like, I'm training to qualify for Boston. I'm training to qualify for Boston. And she was very vocal about it, telling everybody about it. And I was like, man, this is not a good idea. It's a bad idea because it's going to be very challenging to qualify. So your high probability of not making it, especially on this first attempt, and you've not run this fast before. So you don't have any proof that you can do it. And so you shouldn't really tell anybody. But she did. She did tell people and everybody, basically. Um, and then when race day came, she had a really bad day. She was trained and fit and ready, but she just had a bad health day. So her stomach was giving her a lot of trouble. And so she didn't qualify. She wasn't even close. And yet I observed like she fought really hard to get to the finish, and she did finish. And when she did, she was happy. She was like joyful to be done. And when people would ask her, "Oh, did you qualify?" She was like, "No, but I'd finished, and I was really, so glad to be done and to finish it." And they were like, "Well, good job. You put it out there, you tried, good job." And I was observing like, wow, the world didn't end, right? Everything kind of kept going. She had such a purpose and a mission to qualify that um, she was okay that she had tried her best and it didn't work, and life kept going. And I thought, there's something to that. So I decided I'm going to put this in the midst of like what a lot of turmoil was going on at work. I thought this will be a good thing for me to put a stake in the ground and do something similar in terms of like, I'm going to set this bold goal for running and tell people I'm going to train and qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I'd run 9 marathons to that point and had never even come close to qualifying for the Boston Marathon. And I think it was in large part because I never really set this goal, put it out there, and did the things that you need to do then to accomplish a challenging goal. And so once I set that goal and started telling people, I was like, man, I gotta change some things, right? So I took stock of like what I was really good at with running, and then what did I need to change? So my nutrition, I needed to get more focused, and I needed to hire a coach because I'd never done that before and come up with a specific plan. So I got very dialed in on the steps that I would need to follow in order to have a shot at qualifying. I knew every split that I needed to run and every workout. I got very focused for the first time. And then 22 weeks later, I laced up and ran a marathon up in Duluth, Minnesota called Grandma's Marathon, and ran the fastest marathon I'd run in my life, right at 50 years old, and qualified for the Boston Marathon. And so I all of a sudden it was like, man, there's something to this whole idea of establishing a goal and setting a big goal and having some purpose or some mission tied to it, right? So to go back to your question around purpose or mission, for me, at that point too, I hired a personal coach for me, not a running coach. I had a running coach, but I hired a coach to kind of work with me on just looking into me and like help me understand more of what I'm about. And I came to this thing of, you know, am I here on this earth to make money? Is that what I'm here to do? Am I strictly like this engine of generating cash or money? And does my family really need that? Is that what they want? What is my purpose? And as a Christian and someone that has a faith life that I really kind of kept hidden, or not really hidden so much. I wasn't faith forward. I just had it in the background, would go to church. I never really, didn't have it, wasn't leading and being passionate and talking about that. But as I started to dig into like, why am I here on the earth? If life is a miracle, and it is a miracle, it's a miracle that I'm here. Well, what did my creator have in mind for me? Is that, what did he want me to be doing? And if you look at scripturally, he says in the Bible, two things, right? Love your God and love your neighbor as yourself. Like, you're called to do two things: love and worship God, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's it. And so I was like, okay, so I need to, I'm going to focus on loving God and spending more time growing closer to God, building a relationship with God, Jesus Christ, and then looking for ways to serve others. And I started to think, am I serving others in this role in what I'm doing? And there were parts of what I did in the role that I had in this medical facility. We took care of men and took care of patients, and that's a good thing. But the disconnect that I was feeling in the job that I was doing, and the environment, and the goal being strictly that we were going to sell the business so we could make money. I'm like, that's not what I'm here to do, right? And I need to lean into, if I'm here to serve God and serve my neighbor, serve my fellow man, well, what gifts, talents, and blessings have I been given that I can use to serve my fellow man? And it was, what I came to was, well, I've learned a lot in my corporate life. I've been in some of the best organizations, some of the largest consultancies. I've worked for entrepreneurial companies, small companies, large companies. And through that experience, I've learned a ton that I can share with others. And I also have this awareness now coming into the latter part of my career of the importance of mission and purpose and staying aligned with your values. And when you get astray of those values, where it can take you. And I thought, how valuable will it be for me to be able to share that with others and help to, raise others up through mentoring, coaching, and speaking. And so I left my corporate life in July of 2021 with a goal, and not a single client, not a single one, with a goal of, I'm going to become a coach, and I'm going to coach men and women to understand that life is a miracle, and then help them sort through what their core values are, what their purpose and mission is on life, and how to accomplish that. I'm going to take the lessons learned that I've had from both my corporate life as well as my endurance and physical and training life, that things that I've taken there from how to set bold goals and go get them. And I'm going to share that with people. And so I've been building that since 2021, 4 years coming up.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, UODFudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family-owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate-loving patriots just like you. Go to UODFudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick-Me-Up, an all-American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So, right now, go over to eodfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's eodfudge.com. eodfudge.com. And now back to the show. Yeah, a friend of mine uh, just retired from the Navy, 36 years in service, and yeah, well, he we were talking, and he's like, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do in my retirement. He is taking some time off. He's actually hiking the Appalachian Trail right now, but I told him, don't worry. Pretty soon you're gonna be so busy you're gonna wonder how you fit a job in before. But you heard what you mentioned earlier about training for Boston and worried about not telling people about it. There's so many facets to that. Why would and this is you in like in a general sense, why would one be afraid or think it'd be a bad idea to tell about your goals, about reaching for something a little bit outside your comfort zone, maybe a big goal? And uh, would why would one think that it would be bad for others to do the same thing? And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I want to do something big, but I'm afraid to tell others because I might fail. Is it something about what others think of us? What somebody might think, or what we might think of ourselves if we didn't reach our goal, on the first try? But yeah, that lesson of you're training a friend, and your friend, yeah, not qualifying for Boston, but appreciating how far she actually had come. But I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah. What's interesting, what you said there, Aaron, is you're so right, is she had this appreciation for like, what did I take away? Well, I really fought hard today and I finished. And then what was interesting was when we looked at her race, her time, and we sat back and looked at it, initially that was, oh man, you didn't qualify. And she wasn't even close because she had a really rough day. At the same time, she'd run one marathon prior. And even though she really struggled on this day to qualify and struggled physically, she beat that prior time. So it was a PR day. It was a personal record day for her. Fastest marathon she'd ever run. Didn't qualify, but still set a record. And so she was able to kind of pull that win out, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize like that. That was my best day ever. Even though it was such a hard day, she had become a different runner through the training and the fact that she had really was committed to the training, and because she had set that goal and she was committed to like, okay, I'm going to do the work now to achieve this goal. And so she was better for it. To your question around like, why do people do that, right? Generally, why do we not want to share or set big goals? Because we're afraid of failing. For me, I can speak to that is early in life, for me, I learned to really hate losing more than I enjoyed winning, right? I despised losing. And part of it was, I grew up in an athletic kid with my big brother is 7 years older than me and is really athletically gifted, very, very committed to athletics. And as a 7 year, when you're 8 years old and your 15-year-old brothers, you're playing a game against them, you're going to get punished. I got punished on the regular, right? So I lost a lot as a kid. And, like all good big brothers, he would celebrate those victories with crazy, hideous dances and all sorts of things. And so I was usually, on the ground crying or something pathetic. And so I was like, man, I just don't want to even play. Like, because I know I'm going to lose. So I started to look for ways that I could play games that I knew I could win because I just despised losing so much. And I didn't even celebrate wins. It was just like the satisfaction of not losing. And what that led to is, in a lot of ways, not 100%, because I certainly took risks in my professional career when you look at some of the job moves I made, but it led to me playing safe in a lot of ways, right? Really kind of playing it like not stretching, not putting myself out there. It showed up for me in school. So I was a pretty top student, right? So I was an academic kid. I loved to study. I loved to learn. I had a good work ethic. And if you know the DISC profile, right? So I'm a high C, high conscientiousness, which means I like to be accurate and right and precise. And one of my biggest fears is being unprepared, right? One of those wake up or having those nightmares about not doing your homework or whatever. I had a few of those. So I was a pretty good student, and yet I didn't put myself into the high level classes, right? I stayed in all the regular classes, even though I had counselors and teachers saying, you should take advanced, whatever, math or English. And I was like, no, why would I want to do that? It's much more fun just to dominate the area that I'm in, and just kind of coast along, getting straight A's and 98s and 99s and 100s, because it feels good to not lose. And if I put myself out there and stretch, I may have to work hard, and I may not win. I may not be the best kid in the class. In fact, I likely won't be. I've seen those kids in those other classes. They're smarter than me. Why would I want to put myself up against them? Instead of seeing it as a way to get better and put myself up against someone and see what you're made of, I would shrink from that. Right. And it was just this, again, hatred of losing. And, but the reality is, it's the idea now that we either win or we learn, right? So even a loss, and I think you said it may have been before we hit record, that the losses teach us way more than the wins, right? The losses are, while in the sometimes in the ugliness of something that goes gnarly, like my friend's, horrible race day that she was having so much trouble. We'd learn so much about ourselves, that how can you look at it in hindsight and say that that was a bad day if you take away all these positives from the lessons you learned in that struggle? And so I started to really embrace this idea of, doing challenging, hard things is a great thing, because it teaches us, it shows us, number one, what our capabilities really are, and two, we learn about ourselves in that struggle. We learn, what we're made of, what we're capable of. We learn what happens when things don't go well. And so, a lot of times it's hard to do. At the same time, it's the right thing to do, which is when you're having a really hard moment, um, asking, like, what can I do with this to benefit others? Like, how do I take this challenge, this life lesson, this layoff or whatever, and use it to help somebody else in some way, right? Whether it's they're going through something similar, or maybe they're just going through something difficult. How do you take some life lesson and help somebody else in some way? And as I'm saying these words, I'm thinking, man, and who am I telling? Aaron, who's, you've gone through this unbelievable hardship, and yet you have found a way to take those lessons and reflect them out in a positive way to help others, right? And are helping others through how you've come through, what is your own difficult time, right? And that's a vast understatement.
One of the best ways for me to actually get through some of the hardest parts were to ask myself what I'm learning from this experience, and then how can I use it to help others get through their challenges. And so it it's good for society in general that we learn. It's like the hero's journey, right? You you learn and you go through your own hardships, but then you go back and you teach. But with that in the back of your mind, it becomes more of a purpose driven activity, whatever that hardship is. So uh, it's one that you have to suffer. Okay, knowing that you've got to get through this no matter what. But then it actually makes it easier in a sense if you've got that that purpose driving you forward. So you're absolutely right. If you can just stop for a moment to, stop talking, just stop thinking, like correct your own thoughts. Right? This is really hard. I don't like it. Um, it's really painful. I'd rather quit. But then you start asking those questions like, okay, how am I going to grow from this? What am I going to learn? How will I become better? And then it's literally, this has been proven. Was it Jim Quick, and about literally learning in school, right? As if you can, if you're trying to learn material, try to learn it as though you're going to give a class on it later. Literally teach the material you're trying to learn yourself, and it actually becomes a lot easier to memorize, to digest. And you were talking about, and not to bring this back to running, but it's a great metaphor, and I'm a runner too. But yeah, talking about how if we fear failure, we we won't. You said it. You won't stretch. You won't you won't reach for something more. So you stay in that. And I went blind, and then I ran my first marathon, and then I ran a couple more. I ran Boston, and then meningitis, and I went deaf. And I came home in a wheelchair because I also lost my vestibular balance, that inner ear gyro. So I was in a wheelchair, and I was deaf, I was blind, and they got back on the treadmill, held on with an iron grip, of course. But I started walking, and I dedicated myself to running a marathon again. And a year later, I mean, that was a hell of a stretch from where I was to where I wanted to go. But a year later, after the meningitis, I ran my hometown, Akron, Ohio. Ran the marathon there. And you know what? All that struggle from not being able to stand on my feet because of the balance issues, to back to marathon strength. I actually ran my first sub 4 marathon,
Wow. It's insane.
qualify for Boston again, because blind guys get different standards.
It's incredible, man.
But yeah, because I'd stretched, I'd learned, I'd become better, not because of the hardship, not despite the hardships, but because of the struggle.
100%. Yeah. Yep. So man, that's incredible. What an incredible story that you shared. Just unbelievable. And talk about overcoming, like, running blind and running a marathon, running sub 4 hour after not being able to stand or walk because your gyro is jacked up. And then doing that, without being able to see and having to get your balance, get all that stuff going on. It's incredible.
Well, even the marathon itself was maybe one of the toughest races I've ever run, because not only I had the original challenge, just moving forward, and then I definitely underestimated the Cuyahoga River Valley hills. Didn't train for that on my treadmill. But then I was also dealing with a whole new challenge I had never faced before, was that three-dimensional, the balance issue. So I was using muscles to balance myself a lot more, because it wasn't like, balance didn't come to me naturally anymore. So it was like I was expending 3 times as much energy as I would have prior to the meningitis. So it was definitely a lot harder than I'd ever run. But because I had to put extra effort in, I I got more out. I moved faster. And it also didn't hurt that I had a team red, white, and blue, like a peloton of other veterans and volunteers all around me, and just like I had like a couple of like fullbacks running ahead of me, blind runner coming through. So,
Oh man,
but anyways,
nice.
as you do this, corporate training, you do these speaking engagements. What are the biggest challenges you're seeing, you know, seeing people face nowadays? Maybe with their own self talk, their own limitations.
Yeah, I think that what you've hit upon there, right? So self-talk is a big deal, and from my coaching experience and coaching others, it's pretty consistent. And I'd take the pretty out and just say it's consistent that people speak negatively to themselves. And I know it's been a challenge for me, and I used it personally. I thought it was helping me. Like I'm really hard on myself, and that drives me forward. And when I had a coach ask me, "Do you think it helps you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I think it does help me." And he's like, "Okay. Well, do you speak that way to others that you have high expectations of, like your team or your kids?" And I was like, "Well, no." And he asked, "Well, why not?" And I was like, "Well, because it'd be crushing. It wouldn't inspire them to do more. It would likely encourage them to do less." He's like, "Well, then why are you speaking that way to yourself? And how could you speak to yourself, right? What would be motivating? What if you think about your best coaches or your best, athletic coaches? What inspired you?" I'm like, "Well, when a coach that I really respected told me like, 'Good job,' or 'You're doing great,' or 'Here's what you need to do next,' man, I would die to accomplish that." He's like, "Well, maybe try that," right? So self talk is a definitely a big deal, and I would say um, accomplishing small things along the way gives you confidence on the journey toward a bigger goal, right? So I've termed this like this idea, and it's not a novel idea, but this idea that small wins big, right? So small steps, you have a big goal, something bold, something that you put out there, and the way to get that is just one little micro step at a time. And what happens as you move toward that goal is you become a different human. You become a different person through the confidence that comes from the experiences, right? So, like for my Boston Marathon story, I, as you know, right, so there's a qualifying standard based on your sex, your gender, and your age, right? So for me, I had to run, I believe it was a 3 hour and 20, sorry, it was 3 hour and 30-minute marathon, and I ran 3:26:25. So I beat the qualifying standard by 3 minutes 35 seconds. And the way Boston works, as you know, and other your listeners may not know, is they only have so many spots on the road, right? So they have about 38,000 or so slots that they can medically take care of people, and that there's enough room to get fire trucks around and stuff like that. And so if they have more qualified runners than 38,000, well, then they have to start culling that group back. So you've qualified, but they tell you, "Oh, based on all these people that qualified, you needed to beat your time by, say, a minute or 30 seconds or whatever." Every year it's a little different. Some years, if you qualify, you're in. In fact, in the old days, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 10, if you qualified, you were in, right? You were going to get invited to race. 100%. In fact, they gave you an extra minute. So if your qualifying time was say 3 hours 30, you were given 3 hours 30 and 59 seconds. And if you were within that extra 59 seconds, you were still guaranteed to run it. Well, popularity of running and different things. Now a lot more than 38,000 qualify. So they set this number after all the qualifying is done and say you had to beat your time by X. You don't know until it's over. All right. And the year that I qualified and beat my time by 3:35, in the history of the race, 123 years of the race, you never needed to beat your qualifying standard by that much time in order to be invited to run the following April, right, in Boston, except the year that I ran it, right? So that year you had to beat your time by 4 minutes, 52 seconds. So I was 77 seconds short of what I needed in order to be invited to come run in Boston in April. I was a qualified runner, but not an invited runner to come run the race. 77 seconds short. And I had a lot of friends say, oh man, you must be devastated. That's such a robbery. Like that's unfair. You qualified. You should be in. And I remember being moderately, I'm like disappointed, like, but like, Mom, I'm just going to train and run faster because I had already set like a 7-minute PR as a guy that hadn't, that was older than I'd ever been when I ran that race, right? As we always are. And I had never run a marathon as fast as I ran that marathon. And I beat my prior PR, which I had set like in 2012, like 6 years prior, by 7 minutes. And so I was like, I know what I'm capable of now. I know I can keep pushing. I'm just going to qualify again. I'm going to run faster. And so 8 months later, I ran in Fort Worth, Texas, and I ran 4 minutes faster again. Right. So, and Boston took out, they said, man, we were almost, that's like bad that we had so many disappointed qualified runners. We had to tell so many runners that they were not invited to come up here. We're going to set the standard higher so that we don't have to do that again. So they took 5 minutes away from everybody. So now 8 months later, I had to run not 3:30, I had to run 3:25, right? So I had to go even faster. And I ran a 3:22:04. So once again, I beat my prior PR by minutes, which in marathon running, when you're, that's a lot. It's not, it's, if you only beat it by a minute, you're doing pretty good. I was beating it by multiple minutes, my PR. And so I qualified again. And I got the card that time where they said, congratulations, you needed to beat it by, I can't even remember. I beat it by like 2:56, and I needed to beat it by like, I don't know, 1:30 or something like that. And so I had more than exceeded the time needed. I was good to go, got the card, and it said, congratulations, you're welcome to, can't wait to see you in Boston, April of 2020, right? April of 2020, as we all know, a lot was going on back then. For the first time in 124 years of the race, there was no Boston Marathon in April of 2020, courtesy of COVID. And I was training to run that April race, and I was 15 or 16 weeks into a 20-week program, and I was ready to go qualify again at Boston. I was going to qualify for Boston at Boston, and I was just like a machine. Like I'm just going to keep going, like no big deal. COVID breaks out. People are like, oh, and then the first marathon gets canceled, the second marathon. And there's this rumor, oh, Boston might get canceled. What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I can't do anything about it. Well, what am I supposed to think? I'm just training, and there'll be another race. I'll run another one. And then they did cancel Boston 5 weeks or 4 weeks before the race date. So I was trained. I was ready to go into a taper. I was done. I mean, I was fit as a fiddle and ready to rip it. And there wasn't a race. It didn't happen. So, but again, I have friends like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. It's so unfair. You should have been there last year and you got robbed. And now this year there's no race. And isn't it awful? And I was like, no, like I'm a different runner now. I'm a different human. It doesn't matter to me that the life circumstances threw me this curveball that I don't get. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm just going to keep running. So what it did was it taught me, it showed me through all those incremental little changes, that small wins big mentality I'd made a massive shift with tiny little micro steps along the way. And it took me to a whole nother place. I was a different human. So that to me is the lesson that comes out of that. Right now, once, for about a year, I think there were no marathons. You couldn't run a marathon, right? Because COVID was going on and these cities couldn't figure out how to do races. And so there were none. And in that time, my goals, my purpose, my mission changed again, where I was like, okay, training this hard for a marathon, there's got to be a push and a pull, right? So I was sacrificing a massive amount of time with my family, with my wife. Really, my kids were grown at this point, and it was really with my wife. And so, life revolved around me training and eating right and all these things that I loved. I was committed to it. And yet it was taking away from, her and my time together. And I was so focused on the importance of like, well, I got to get can't do a social thing tonight because I have a training in the morning at 5:30 in the morning, or I was training super early. So even earlier than that, 4 in the morning. And it was like putting too much pressure on our marriage, where it's like, okay, so I like, all right, mission accomplished. I accomplished the goal. I qualified for Boston twice. I had the card invited to come run the race. I'm good. Like, next thing, like I'm going to go back to focusing on, I want to be fit, healthy, and keep running. So I ran a trail ultra, and a couple other, like I did a 24-hour race. Just how far can you go in 24 hours? I've done some multi-day things, but the focus around training for Boston it was taking a toll on my marriage, to where I was like, it's time to put that goal's been accomplished. It's time to, now let's refocus on what's really important, which is my family, my wife, my relationship with her. And so I dialed that back, and, kept on rolling. But it was, again, became more about like me taking time to understand values, mission, and purpose, and having that built in now, that engine built in of like, okay, does this align with me, my values, my purpose, and why I'm here? And if it doesn't, well, it's time to stop, right? Let's not just feed the ego.
Just remembering how much time I spent either on the treadmill or the road training for hundreds, and the bad water logged so much time. There'd be 5 6 hour days just jogging. So yeah, uh, but I guess there's there's a couple lessons to be learned there. One being that don't be afraid to reach for something that's well beyond your current ability level, or at least your 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 current view is a little beyond your horizon. Set that goal with that faith that you can accomplish something bigger than you've already accomplished. Then there's also take an assessment. Reassess your goals, your values every once in a while, and sometimes maybe getting to Boston, running Boston, it isn't the most important thing in your life. It might take precedence for maybe in that's just one example. Career, family, friends, you know, working on yourself. Sometimes things take a higher order in that list of precedences. So
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's this idea that, you know, continuing to have a mechanism to reflect things off of, to test it for appropriateness, truth. Is this for me or not for me? Does it serve? And going back to that, it all goes back to, for me, is this helping me to serve and honor God? Is it helping me to serve and honor my fellow man, my people, right? And once it no longer felt like it was time to do something different. And so, my wife certainly is part of that serving other people, right? So I have this strong, belief as a husband, and our we'll be celebrating 32 years married coming up in May. And like every marriage, there's hard moments, and abundant moments, and all these things. And yet it is truly, like, I believe it's the thing for me, it's a sacramental marriage. It's a covenant marriage. My wife and I, even 32 years married, like we met, I was 19. We love each other. We love hanging out. We love spending time together. And it's because we've invested in the relationship. And certainly we've had our challenging times, like any marriage, any relationship. And it's for me, it's when I've lost focus on that, the importance of that, then that things get astray. So always taking that time to reflect back and go, whatever goal it is. And I love what you said there, Aaron, is like, put a bold goal out there and stretch to it, and see what you're capable of. And I agree, because likely again, those lessons that we learn along the way, and we will become a different human, in that journey. Whether or not you reach the goal or you don't, you're going to become new and you're going to become something different. But always taking that time to reflect back on, is this aligned with my goals, my values, my purpose, my mission, and why I was created to be on this earth? Does it serve God? Does it serve my fellow man? And if it doesn't, well, it's probably not going to end super well, or it's feeding an ego in me. What's crazy about that is, I believe you can have successes of this world that pop out of things like that. Like, you could be the biggest, you could be the most hideous person on the planet, make a fortune, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, right? The fact that, you could be an evil despot. Like, so look at who was the guy, Bernie Madoff, right? So Bernie Madoff had his Ponzi scheme going. He robbed people of billions of dollars or whatever it was. And he made a fortune. He probably ate all the best food and had the best cars and homes and all this stuff, but he was an evil person doing terrible things. So, but on the surface, before you knew how bad he was, you would think, oh, this guy's really good and successful. So the world was kind of, showering him with what was apparent worldly goodness, but he couldn't have been more evil and bad. He was stealing from retirees, for goodness sakes. And so I think that can happen. And it's easy to go, oh, if you get in this comparative mindset of, oh, look at so-and-so, they're so bad, and yet they're so apparently rewarded for it. I just think that what we assign goodness to is out of alignment in that moment, because it's easy to assign, I think, especially in this country, is we assign money with goodness, or money. Oh, he's made a lot of money though. I mean, he's kind of a big jerk, but he sure made a lot of money. And so it must be okay. And it's like, maybe for this world, but for me, it's like this world's we're passing through it, right? It's at the end of the day, we're not here just to amass things for ourselves. In my view, we're here to, again, serve God, serve others, look for ways to be helpful, be good, serve others, pour into others.
It's kind of the chicken or the egg type of thing, where do your goals become your purpose, or is the vision of who you want to be and what you want your life to be, your purpose, and the goals are the milestones along the way. So I think that's a great place to start landing the plane.
Right on.
Let's segue into the countdown to impact. That's the 3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person who've all made an impact in your life.
3. What was it again? What was the 3? 3 what?
3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person.
2 quotes and 1 person. Got it. 3 books. Okay. So, well, a layup for me would be the Bible, right? So I'd say that I take great peace from reading scripture. So many life lessons come out of reading scripture for me. We're in the season right now of Lent. And so I have a practice of reading scripture daily. It should be my practice all year. It could be. I need to make it that. But right now I'm reading scripture daily, and it's so it just gives me such great peace and direction and confidence. So certainly the Bible, again, a layup. The next 2, one I would say is, it's funny because I'm pretty sure Paulo Coelho is an atheist. I think he is, but he wrote The Alchemist, and The Alchemist is a great book. I recommend it to all my clients that I coach. I recommend it to really anybody. It's the story of the hero's journey, and it really, what I would suggest is, if you read The Alchemist, read it from the point of view of the shepherd. Put yourself in the shoes of the shepherd. Don't read it like observing the shepherd. Read it as if you are the shepherd. In that book, it's a parable. Great story of how, we're learning life lessons as we go, and we think we're in a place that we shouldn't be, and yet it's exactly where we need to be to learn the next thing that's going to take us to the next place. And eventually that hero returns home with this magic that he needs to bring to the world. And yet he never would have expected the places he went to in order to bring that magic back to the world. So The Alchemist is a fabulous book. I recommend reading it, and certainly maybe even reading it once a year. It's a great one. That's number 2. Number 3 would be, the one that comes to mind is Stephen Pressfield wrote The War of Art. If you're familiar with The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, he's a great author. One thing I love about his story is he was like an old time ad man in, I believe, in New York. So he was like an advertising agency corporate guy developing ads for companies, right? And did that successfully. And he hated it. I think he may have liked it at one point, but then he developed like, I can't stand this. And he would quit to be a writer, but he would not fail, but he couldn't sustain the writing thing. It just wasn't paying him any money. And so he would go back to the ad world, get a job again, and then do well again and have success and get promoted. And then he would either turn down a promotion or he would quit again. And his colleagues were like, well, you're a maniac. What are you doing that you keep leaving? If you would just stay, you would have a huge success in the ad world. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to be in the ad world. I hate it. And so he would quit again and go back to writing. And this happened for, I think, like a decade. I think he did it in his book. I think he said 6 times that he left the ad world to be a writer and couldn't make it and went back and forth. And eventually he wrote some unbelievable classics. Like he wrote, I think, Guardians at the Gate and some other fiction books and some parables and just some incredible works, written work. So, really, really good writer. And The War of Art is all about getting your art out, whatever it might be. And so it could be art as in like painting and writing and stuff, or it could be art as in I'm a plumber and my art is I'm like really good at it. And how do you perfect your art and get it out into the world? Because that's the gift you need to give the world, is whatever your art is. And yet we put all these barriers up, and we a lot of our conversation here, and like we say, well, I could never be like an independent plumber because I don't know enough about X, Y, or Z. So you hide it, and what you're doing is robbing the world of that gift, of that art. And so he talks about this war of art, and it's an internal war that we fight in keeping our talent from the world. And how do we win that war and get that talent out there? This is a really, really good and inspiring book. I love reading that one. So that's 3. Okay, so 3 books and 2 quotes. Oh man, this is going to be a challenging one. So let me go. The first one is a layup. So it's St. Augustine. I'm reading right now the book Confessions by St. Augustine. And he has a quote in there where he's talking about why we're in a constant state as humans, a constant state of like angst or turmoil, and why we choose to do things that we then look back on and go, oh, why am I so stupid? Why did I do that? Right? Why did I do that? Make that terrible choice? I didn't even want to do that, and yet I did it anyway. It's kind of going into the sinful nature of man and some things like that. But his quote is, he's speaking to God, and he says, Lord, you have designed us for you, and my soul will be restless until I rest in you. And that to me is just so powerful, because I can appreciate it. I can associate with it. I see myself in it. This whole idea of, worry and fear and angst and anxiety and things like that. And why does that happen? And then usually on reflection, looking back, you think, oh, that was a bunch of wasted energy and effort. I didn't need to be worried about that or fearful of that. And yet it's sort of this condition that I go through and that I think others can go through. And the reality is we were designed by God to worship God and be with God. And until we're doing that, we're really in this state of restlessness, right? We're restless until we rest in him. So I love that quote. Gosh, what's another good quote, man? 2 good quotes. I'm looking for inspiration on my bookshelf. So many good writers.
Maybe a rule of thumb, a tip. I don't know. I'm terrible with quotes myself, so I know I'm putting somebody on the spot. Sometimes
No, it's good. I like being put on the spot. It's helpful. I don't know that I'm going to have an actual quote. Yeah, I'm coming up blank here, buddy. Let me think. Let me come back. Maybe I'll come back to that one. And what was the number one thing? One person. Yeah, so many people in my life have made a massive impact. My dad has been a huge influence on my life. still alive, still kicking, still super fit and healthy at 88 years old, works out 5 days a week, eats well. He's been a great dad to me here on this earth. And so my dad, I think would definitely be one. I've had some great coaches in my life that come to mind too, that were influential. Certainly my relationship with the Lord, with Jesus Christ, is paramount. Again, a kind of a layup answer for me. Your audience listeners are probably, saw that one, would see that one coming. And I would say it's absolutely true. So number one would be my relationship with God and Jesus Christ. And from a human perspective, here on this earth, walking around every day, person that's influenced me, I would say my dad would be that person.
Well, the countdown became 3, 2, 3. Then
There you go. there it is. 3-1-3. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate your time and this conversation. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, I got one more. How about I got the quote? I came up with one, right? So, because we talked a lot about sales and the importance of sales, and I would say I don't know if it's an official quote, but it's this idea that you eat what you kill, right? So in this world, right, we gotta make it happen. We got to get out there and get after it, and you eat what you kill is a sales mantra, I think. So we'll go with that one as my second quote. It's kind of weak, but I think it fits the context of our talk today.
Love it. Really appreciate it. Well, with that, thank you, and I wish you all the best.
Man, thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate you having me on the show, my friend. It's been an honor, and I enjoyed it very much.
All right, Disruptors, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And if you haven't already, go ahead and give it 5 stars, leave a review, leave a comment on YouTube, subscribe everywhere, and share it with a friend, please. It goes a long way to getting awesome guests like Eric here to a broader audience. So thank you so much. And of course, eat more fudge, eodfudge.com. All right, Eric. Before I let you go, where can others find you?
Oh, I appreciate you asking. So my website is the best place. It's ericsardina.com, ERICSARDINA, ericsardina.com, my name. Instagram would be number 2, the Eric Sardina. So it's at the Eric Sardina is my Instagram handle. I just started a YouTube page where I'm putting my podcast up. And so that's the other place. So is my podcast, Return to Authenticity. It's on all the places you find podcasts and now is on YouTube as well. So video versions of the shows are popping in there daily. And again, that show is called Return to Authenticity, where I interview folks just like Aaron here, my man, who was one of my recent guests. So I encourage you to check that out and give us some ratings and reviews and all those things. They're awesome. So appreciate that, Aaron.
All right, awesome. And as they say, links in the show notes. All right. Take care, Eric, and have a great day.